Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. My name is Phil First. I'm the CEO, founder at HFS Research. And yeah, all we need is a miracle today. And to help us provide that miracle, I've got some fantastic guests on for the next hour. And we've all given up this time purely for fun in an unbridled, unsponsored conversation to think about what's going on in the world and a little disruption that's going on and what's wrong with it. So joining me Marie Myers from HP, Malcolm Frank from Cognizant, Alison Saygraves, M&T Bank, Kellyanne Kumar, who's the CTO HCL, Jason Kingdon, the Chairman and CEO of Blue Prism, and Chris Caldwell, the President of Concentrics. I'll get these folks to introduce themselves shortly, but to get started, just a little housekeeping. You can ask a question if you tap in your question into the little box on the right hand side when you on your drop down menu. I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom at this point. You can find out how to ask that and we'll try and get to it today. A little bit about us at HFS. We like to be a research partner for many businesses across the technology and business world, and we're all about helping companies find their path, which is really what's happening right now. So what's that chink of light and how you're going to move towards it. We have a very large network of readers and subscribers across the world, about 2 million plus these days, and very engaged with our blogs and social media and obviously our research site. And if you go there, yes, it doesn't feel as fresh and new as it did, but we pivoted our entire research agenda around what's happening in the world, and our analysts are covering every industry and how COVID-19 in particular has made a huge impact on what's going on in those industries in particular. So if you go to our website, you'll find some of that research, and we made much of it available for free to non-clients as well. So we believe that people like reading our stuff and might eventually decide to sign up and become a premium subscriber. A prime minister who you probably know very well wasn't the greatest peacetime prime minister, but he was a damn good wartime prime minister. And if you ever saw the movie Churchill, I thoroughly recommend it. But despite the pain and hardship and some of the really disruptive and awkward things happening in the world right now, it's a crisis, and you should try and not waste it and get ahead of it, because this is a time of real change, real disruption. I think in our lifetimes, we're going to look back at 2020 as a landmark year where everything kind of changed, and hopefully not all for the worse. There'll be some good things that will emerge from these experiences, maybe some accelerated positive transformation as well. But this is going to be around for some time, and it could be years before we get back to some type of recovery, particularly when you see what's happening in South America and other parts of the world where they're really suffering from some of this pandemic in particular and some of the economic impacts of this. But there's going to be great opportunities for some. Others will pivot, some will survive, and some are just going to be plain unlucky. You're in the wrong industry at the wrong time, and it's going to be very hard to find a path for some of them if you're in the travel or consumer business areas, which are being very badly impacted. But most of us here, we're in the industry of technology and business and services around that. We should consider ourselves fortunate. We are going to be relied upon even more, I think, as we emerge from this struggle. And just look at the NASDAQ. It's at the highest point ever, despite disconnects between reality and stock markets. The one part of the stock market which I think is actually thriving is technology, because of what's happening right now. If this had happened 15 years ago, we'd have been screwed, right? But it hasn't. It's, my son and his friends are debating whether they prefer Google Classrooms to physical classrooms, for example. Whereas I think most of us on this call probably think meeting people physically and having a glass of wine or meal is probably more enjoyable than doing a Zoom party, but it's better than nothing, right? So what's going to emerge from this is a whole sort of slew of, I think, much more digitally agile businesses, the companies who find the light and can follow it, and those who can quickly get out of creaking legacy infrastructures and make a leap are going to be far more successful as we evolve. And, I think automation is going to be very native to the survivors of this thing. It's going to be something that is just part of your organization. It isn't necessarily going to be, I'm going to buy this little piece of software to give me a little bit of automation here. It's going to be something far more fundamental as a native component of how we operate when we look at these anywhere employee models and these emerging digital workplaces that we're seeing. But we are in what we term this, and I'm terming this, we're in a have-to-have economy, right? If you want to survive this, you need to be producing something that clients just have to have. This is not a nice-to-have market, and you need to make sure you have something that is absolutely imperative to your clients to survive. And pivoting is all about, having that capability and also developing it more when we emerge from this crisis. We talked a lot about this hyper-connected enterprise before COVID, and we talked about the fact that we'd evolved from shared services, offshoring, analog outsourcing, the emergence of digital a decade ago, where we looked at smack stacks, and that was all about, how do you respond quickly to your clients online? That was the early digital concepts. It was about speed of response. And then we got into this one office era where it's much more about how can you be more anticipatory? How can you predict what your clients are going to do before they may even know it themselves? And then we get to the future, which is all about hyper-connected enterprises and much more connected supply chains, which is more relevant than ever with what we're seeing in the world today, where geopolitics probably plays as much of an issue than anything else now in terms of decision-making with investments in technology and services. We're seeing much more focus around super intelligent digital workers, and even the advent of quantum computing could completely change how we're getting computing power in the future. But the bottom line here was, all we were really doing for 3 decades was the same stuff, just a little faster, a little cheaper, a little more effective, moving data around the company a bit better. But to truly find a new threshold of value, you really needed to have a look at your fundamental processes, have a look at how you literally knitted together a lot of your company and made some genuine transformation to find that threshold of value. And the frustration we had, we were on every pulpit we could find in the industry saying, we need some change, right? Companies need to get out of these old mindsets. We can't keep doing HR this way, marketing this way, supply chain this way, when it really needs to change. And we've had that handed to us in spades. I mean, we've had a change agent thrust upon us like never before. And now, many companies are already going through transformations, just moving processes into work at home models and these remote models. It's like, how do we get the stuff to our customers better? Have we thought of doing it this way or that way, and that sort of thing. So we're already in the midst of a fairly rapid transformation. And as we go through this, we call this the 4 phases of paradigm shock. I won't take you through these all because I think you've seen it at this point. But we're in this phase where we're realizing what's happening, right? This is all about realizing that there is no written rule book for what's going on. This is about bonding with our clients in a shared digital environment. This is about looking at the interplay between business and tech like never before. You cannot be effective as a business professional with low-code software, for example, if you don't understand database schema and how databases and systems can fit together and interrelate with each other. So you need to have some understanding of technology, and in the technology side, you need to understand business logic. You need to understand how these pieces fit together to drive the outcomes that your clients and your partners need to be effective. So this cross-pollination of skills is happening in haste. We're seeing much change in terms of mentality, skill set, and a little bit of fear to sort of drive things. And we're seeing a much bigger shift. 4/5 of enterprises in our recent study are trying to make a shift in terms of pivoting their whole operations to get ahead in this environment. We're no longer looking at little piecemeal bits and pieces. And we're also looking at areas like process automation and AI and cloud as real vehicles to make the shift as we look at the impacts of what's happening around the world. Now, whether this interest turns into actual spending and investment is yet to be seen, but the focus is there. Clients realize they need to be more automated, they need to be smarter about how they do this stuff. But there's an impact on the market. We see a 10% decrease in IT business services this year. That's just in 9 months. So this is heavy. This is a hard hit. The biggest area of impact is professional services, and those discretionary spend areas where well, we might have to have it, but we don't need it right now type spending is what is being cut. And it's the have to have areas around infrastructure and stuff, which are still staying reasonably solid. But overall, there's a heavy hit on the market. And unsurprisingly, when we look at industries, you see travel and retail really hard hit. I mean, travel taking a massive 32% decline this year, retail close to 20% despite online. The physical retail areas are very hard hit with manufacturing. So this is a across the board painful experience for everybody. You know, we think there's going to be a pickup in 2021 if we've looked at various scenarios, and this is the median scenario how this should probably play out. But remember, recessions do end. You know, usually when you know you're in a recession, you're sort of on the way out. One, I'm not sure if that's entirely the case with this one, because I think we're on the precipice right now, but they do end. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And the clients who we find are successful right now are those who kind of already found their bottom. They kind of know how to financially reconstruct their business. They kind of have a plan to get through the next 6, 9, 12 months. They now want to make investments to be bolder and follow that plan and find that light. Whereas there's some other companies we're talking to, you know, I feel that they're still scrambling. They don't quite know what to do. They haven't found that bottom yet. And that's really, really important. Find the bottom, find the light, and then find the path to get there. And you may make this through, but this is truly the way to be successful. So I'd like to sort of kick this off, and I'm going to maybe pick on Chris Caldwell from Concentrix. I'd love to sort of hear your view for, now we're over this new abnormal. What does the new normal look like? You know, what truly does this industry look like as we start to look past what's going on?
So Phil, I think you said it right. I mean, the reality is that most clients out there that we service at the moment are really focused on survival and trying to make the best out of the current situation and grow their business, or at least stabilize their business. And so things that were projects that they thought would be 2 or 3 years would get done, whether it be RPA or digital or redoing workflows or allowing certain work to be done work at home, effectively got approved in weeks versus years. And I think that speed of collaboration, that speed of kind of consensus decision making at some of the clients is going to continue for the next little while, and certainly drive a lot more change in our industry, which I think is overall healthy, but certainly speed is increased dramatically, which I think is fantastic.
So I mean, that's an interesting view. Maybe we get a different view from maybe Alison Seagraves at M&T Bank. But you can do a quick intro for yourself as well. I was rude of me, so if you want to just quickly give us your name, rank, and serial number as you give us your thoughts here, Alison.
Hey everybody, this is Alison Seagraves. I'm the Chief Data Officer at M&T, and I'm actually moving into a role where I'm going to be focusing on the new normal, the next normal, whatever we're going to be calling it. So I'm really excited about it because I think this is really an opportunity. So if we want to call the new normal where we are now, I think it's really a period for us of testing and learning. We're still obviously dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So we're trying to focus on what makes employees and customers feel confident and safe. We were not a company that had a lot of remote workers. Now we have, 90% of our non-customer facing workforce working remotely, and it's going very well. So I think what we're trying to figure out is what's the right touch, what's the right pace, especially around bringing people back to the office. Who do we bring back? That's all to be decided. And we're finding new and innovative ways to serve customers in this environment. And it's really an opportunity to, in the banking sector, I would say, we're meeting our clients at their time of greatest need. It's a time to establish trust and stand out and innovate. And since we're having a little fun, I just thought I would throw in, if I'm able to do this to a potentially British audience, I would add that Shakespeare himself had a new normal. If you want to feel really inadequate about how you handled the quarantine, it's likely that he wrote King Lear and Macbeth while he was in quarantine. So while maybe others were watching, TikTok and doing other things, he's writing the greatest plays, in history. And incidentally, when his theater was closed down and he was struggling for revenues, he pivoted from writing plays to writing long form poetry in order to earn money because he desperately needed money. So you could say that Shakespeare actually invented Elizabethan Netflix because he was able to sell these poems to people who were quarantined. So I think that we as humans have an incredible resilience to adapt in these times, and it's going to be the people who have that resilience and have that passion and innovation who are going to survive.
Wow, thank you, Alison. That's very profound, wonderful. So, let's think about the new wave of acceleration and automation, and which industries are going to make the leap. How rapid is this all going to occur? And Mary Myers from HP, maybe if you could quickly introduce yourself and then give us your thoughts on this, particularly your focus around automation in your new role.
Sure. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's Marie Myers. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, Phil. The Chief Transformation Officer at HP, and certainly, digital acceleration and automation is close to my heart. Look, I think one of the big headlines coming out of this sort of situation we're in is digital transformation is being accelerated. I think there's some awesome quotes out there, whether it's Satya Nadella or one of my trackers that I follow is Bill McDermott, but I think they've all said literally, we've seen digital transformation on steroids here in the last couple of months, whether it's all of us have learned how to get on these calls like we're having today, Phil. We've all figured out how to quickly navigate to working via Zoom and accelerating our own digital understanding and in ways that we never thought possible. And certainly as companies pivot to think about new ways of serving customers and keeping their employees productive, they're turning to digital tools and capabilities to help enable that. So I think this wave of digital acceleration is definitely, we're seeing the foot on the gas pedal. And I think secondly, a lot of us have gone through, testing, situations that we never imagined, where our business continuity plans would be tested at a global level. I think in many cases we thought that continuity would be predicated on one country, one region, one geography being potentially not part of your working environment. But I think for most of us, we never probably imagined that the entire world would be faced with this situation where supply chains would get frozen for an entire period of time. So it really brings to the forefront the need for more automation, because it does help to de-risk your business continuity plans, and it provides you with a way to kind of ensure that you free up your employees to really focus on dealing with a crisis at hand. So I think that we're going to continue to see automation, and certainly, Phil, I think you see that in the market today. There's been a lot more moving to automation, and folks are going to continue to invest and think of new ways to de-risk their own businesses through automation. So that's one emerging theme. And in terms of industries and areas, you just look at the US stock market. Clearly technology, SaaS players are just getting rewarded. And for anybody that's in the area of mobility, I see that as one of the key headlines coming out of all of this is, the way we work has fundamentally changed. And I just don't see us all going back and racing back into the office in droves. I think we're going to have a balance, but anything that helps people learn, work, in this new fashion is definitely going to be a winner. And certainly I think our kids have voted with their feet, Phil. My kids are all Zoom experts. They've got their Zoom backgrounds today. They're all learning online. And frankly, I think they've gravitated. In some ways, they are now, able to move seamlessly between this sort of digital world and the classroom world. And so it's challenging, fundamental institutions like universities on, do you need to have all of this infrastructure to truthfully run, education the way we've known it and grown up? So I think a lot of businesses, their models are going to get challenged, and the winners from this are going to be the ones that can adapt and change and really use digital capabilities to win.
Thank you, Marie. That was very profound again. Thank you. So maybe we can add to this. Someone we haven't had here before, making his debut, is KK from HCL. I hope you're doing well. Who's the Chief Transformation Officer, who has some very profound views. So, how rapid do you think this is happening from your perspective, KK?
Hey, Phil. Thanks. Hey, hi, everybody. Kalyan Kumar. Call me KK. It's easier. Two interesting perspectives, correct? I think one is what I really see is the survival phase, when many companies in the first 90 days were just figuring out, how do I even sustain the way I'm operating? And a lot of chinks in the armor came out, correct? And things which people never cared about in this new world, correct? Just how do I modernize infrastructure? Correct? And suddenly those things became a key point of discussion. Hey, it looks like I don't have basics enabled to make my people work from home. But I think if you really start to shift now, what's really happening is that there are three parallel impacts, Phil. The first is you're seeing a massive social impact, and we're seeing in different parts of the world, things emerging and changing. And in certain countries, you're seeing it's again coming back again, correct? So there is this continuous W-shaped model which keeps going. You have lockdowns and opening and then re-lockdowns. That's going to really impact the social aspect, which includes our entire workforce, employees, customers, and partners. The second is the entire business model. As you said, we're seeing a big thrust because the fundamental approaches have to be rethought, correct? Many of this business operating model, what we call as temporary, will slowly start to become the new model, correct? And things which people never talked about before in such rigor, suddenly it's coming back. And that's where I think one needs to really relook at leveraging automation and doing true digital. I think, in my view, most of the time the industry has been doing what I call as fake digital, correct? They've been looking digital, but they are not being digital, correct? So they end up looking digital, which means it's a lot of front-end-ish digital happening. But when you really start to go down and say, if I need to do true digital, I have to be front to back, which means I have to look at the whole process from start to end, reimagining the supply chain, relooking at commerce, relooking at the way I would engage my customers, CX. So hence, I think automation, AI, all the techniques would be applied, but I think there needs to be a fundamental rethinking. And as you said, certain industries can adapt faster because a lot of the offerings or components or what they deliver can be digitally augmented faster, but there are a lot of industries and a lot of things which still need that, what I call phygital, correct? You need to combine physical and digital together. And then that's the trick which each industry has to go through.
Digital, that's a new one for me, okay. So good. And I'd like to also bring on another debutant, Jason Kingdon. He's the chairman and CEO at Blue Prism. Welcome, Jason.
Hi, Phil. Welcome all.
Wonderful. Glad you could make it. Again, if you want to give a very brief intro, and then I'd love to hear your views around the acceleration of technology investment in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, as a quick intro, I'm a technologist. I was one of the founders of the Intelligent Systems Lab at University College London, set up my first business from there, created an area called Intelligent Transaction Monitoring. We basically became a de facto standard for anti-money laundering technology, and sold it all around the world. Sold that business in 2005, and 2007, I got introduced to a couple of guys working in Newton Willows on this brand new technology that was to become a robotic process automation. And from the minute of seeing it, I thought it was a very, very impactful idea that the guys had created, and it subsequently proved to be. I'm very heartened, I have to say. All the discussion around here that automation and AI is, is where all businesses are going. I mean, just to talk to the broader theme, technology always tends to create its own weather, and it's part of the excitement of it. That's why we do it. We're looking, to change things in terms of the way they take place, and it's really the disruption, which is progress, and so in terms of the kind of our title, in terms of what's wrong with a little disruption. Obviously, we were kind of looking at it in this COVID context, but something that I know the team at Blue Prism are very kind of energized and enthusiastic about is the Black Lives Matter kind of disruption, and the fact that there is needed disruption in terms of what it is that people do, and that the status quo isn't good enough. So you're either engineering disruption because you're trying to create a better circumstances. You're pushing disruption into the status quo because there's a better outcome that's available, or as we've got it in this context, kind of imposed on us. In terms of the acceleration, I think absolutely. I mean, we hear it from the retailers, particularly. That they're saying that maybe 5 years of thinking about technology has been compressed in terms of what it is they have to do. General practitioners, GPs, doctors, they're saying that they've been talking about remote surgeries forever, happening overnight. So absolutely, it's a catalyst for change in terms of things taking place. But I think with COVID, we've still got this overwhelming sense of anxiety. We don't know what the economy is going to look like when we come out the other side, and we get the sense that there's a lot of people just thinking very hard about, well, what should their business look like? How many buildings do they need? The real estate reassessment that must be going on right now, that must be really profound. And so everybody's thinking about it, and they're trying to kind of judge, when does this thing end, and what does that economy look like once it does end?
Good, thank you, Jason. That's a very good. And I think that focus around Black Lives Matter is a fantastic observation, because I think longer term that could be a much more positively disruptive impact in terms of how that impacts our lives. And I'm the first to plead, like, shocked that I thought, wow, why are we talking about racism in 2020? And then you thought about it and realized we've been brushing these issues under the carpet for decades, and everything's coming out now, maybe in sort of response to some of the things going on. But I really appreciate you bringing that up, Jason, as something which I think is
well, Phil, I mean, I mean, the thing I want to add to that is that I think that from the technology sector's perspective, I think that this is stuff that I think that we all feel like that we're very open to. We want to help, and we want to try and figure out how you really change something in this. And I think that would be something that's very exciting if the technology sector really was to take this on as a cause célèbre, something that we got behind. We try and figure out why all these kind of structural kind of blocks stand in the way, and what have you got to do to reorganize to allow other people access, and make certain that these kinds of benefits are being distributed out around to everybody. And I say something that's caused a lot of enthusiasm at Blue Prism, and a lot of thinking going on around that.
Good. Thank you very much, Jason. So last but absolutely not least is Malcolm Frank from Cognizant, the president of the digital business. Good afternoon, good morning, Malcolm.
Hey, Phil, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
Good.
Good stuff. So from your standpoint, as you look at the changing world, from you're based on the East Coast, and and where you're seeing the rapid pace. How are you viewing things? How rapid is the change, and what do you think we're going to be talking about in a few months' time?
It's certainly rapid, it's profound, but first, just reacting to your charts, we talked COVID-19, but you brushed really quickly past HFS 13. So your firm is a teenager now. It's time flies. So congratulations on that. In terms of recessions, and I guess speaking of the past and age, Phil, I think you and I are, the mileage is piling up on the odometer. So this is now our 4th recession in this business. And recessions, they bring massive change to the industry. And if you grab the new wave that comes out of it, it's a 10-year run of massive growth on a new architecture. But if you miss it, you'll get crushed by the wave. And if you view it from a client perspective, in an optimized economy, as we were the last 5 years, they end up doing more with more. Today, they're doing less with less, but they're about to pivot to doing more with less. And they figure out the old architectures and the old approaches won't get them there. And so it drives the scale shift. And if you look of the prior 3, I guess our last vanilla recession was the George Bush, the first recession. This was in 1992. And in the US, it gave us Bill Clinton. But more importantly, from an industry perspective, you may remember going into that recession, it was all DEC and IBM. It was all minis and mainframes. And then it launched the N-tier client server architectures, and small firms became today's IT royalty. This is Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, Cisco that emerged out of that recession. It happened again with 9/11, that we obviously had the trauma of 9/11, but then it was the recession that drove the acceptance of global delivery models. And you may remember going into that, that was the Wired magazine era, where internet services firms were called Scient and Viant and Razorfish. But ultimately, it led to this miraculous growth of TCS, HCL, Cognizant, Wipro, Infi. You draw a circle around those firms, and in just a short period of time, they hired more than 1 million people to fulfill that demand. And then 10 years ago, the credit crisis, you can look back and it's clear as day, that launched the cloud era. So AWS and Azure, you just look at those 2 alone. Both of those companies hit trillion-dollar market caps, and analysts will say in both cases more than half of that was just the cloud business. So these shifts are really important. And I think the $64,000 question in front of all of us is what firms or categories are going to come racing out of this recession in the same manner that we saw those 3 other categories. It's going to happen. And what's fascinating is these new entrants, they're always hiding in plain sight. We already know the names of them. It's just the question is, as Fortune 500 firms are now serious about being software-driven enterprises to the core, what categories and what vendors are going to get a disproportionate share of that business? So I think this is going to be a very exciting 24, 36 months in front of us as we figure that out.
Good. Yeah, I think it's interesting. The race out of this is going to be fascinating, and M&A I think is going to struggle for a few months with the current sort of situations, but that's going to be significant as well. Who makes those bets in the right way? So let's move on to something we've been very passionate about at HFS, and we've spent the last decade talking about the heavy investments in digital on the customer experience. But what seems to be happening now is the employee experience is absolutely so critical, particularly with this common duality between customer and employee in the industry, and the ability for employees to have access to sophisticated tech as customers seems to be more important than ever. And I'll start with you, Chris Caldwell. And also, by the way, you can introduce yourself this time. I do apologize. But you work a lot in the CX space in particular, and you have a lot of digital capability in your own organization. But do you feel EX is becoming the new CX and in this duality?
I do, Phil, although EX is something that, we've looked at for a number of years and invested heavily in. We've got a fairly large employee base, around 240,000 staff around the world. And a lot of them are under the age of 30, and number are under obviously the age of 25. And they've been brought up on sort of the app store of very easy applications, download, they work, they're fast, and number one complaint is generally clients' tools, where they say, hey, why does a tool work this way? Why is it not simple? Why, on and on and on and on and on. And that is a reason for attrition, where people just go, this job's not satisfying, and the tools that we're working are not satisfying. So absolutely, it's a massive focus and factor, and it's something about retention of staff. It's something about engagement with the staff is around the tools that they use. I will say the work at home factor that's been driven by COVID has also brought a lot more of EX involved, which is more around the physical EX and the mental health EX, which is equally as important. I mean, what people have kind of bypassed on working at home through the COVID crisis is that there's a big mental health impact. There's big social issues with people being in an abusive environment at home, and a whole host of other things that are going on that as an organization, and any organization who wants to make sure that they're taking care of their staff, needs to make sure that they're addressing and dealing with and treating as part of the whole EX experience. Similarly, as clients look at customers and say, how are they managing that whole CX experience of both physical, digital type of engagements that they have.
Chris, and let's just go to the customer end. And Alison, I know you've got some views on this as well, but do you feel the EX and CX worlds are really coming together now in a way we haven't seen before?
Yes, I think that we, need to think of our employees as also as our customers. Especially at this time where we're dealing with the uncertainty around COVID, both our employees and our customers have to have confidence and comfort that we care about their safety and that's paramount. We have a shared interest in having a seamless experience. And, one of the things, we still do while we do a lot of digital work, we still have services provided through our branch network, mostly through Drive Up and from different models. But I would say that the interactions are not just transactions, but in a sense, they're kind of a new social contract. And this is achieved through simplifying our journeys and combining the physical and the digital world. I just think the, employee engagement, mental health, all the things that you talked about, those are even more important now as we have a remote environment.
Yeah, I think mental health is a very important question as we're well into 3 months into this thing, and running a small organization myself, it takes a lot of time just to talk to your own people, to see some people are thriving in this environment, some are struggling, you can tell. And can you share anything about how you're addressing that and your organization in terms of keeping morale up and making sure people are healthy and looking after themselves and know how to turn to the right places when this gets difficult?
So we do lots of outreach. We do lots of town halls, huddles. We have partnerships with health services that we provide to our employees. We have so we have a robust set of resources that we share with people. But I think it really comes down to making the time and the efforts to have one-on-one, like personal interactions with teams, with managers and the people on their teams, and taking the extra efforts to really check in on people and how they're doing. We just had a session yesterday. We're doing this throughout our company, an open dialogue on racism, and in my department and other departments are doing it. And it was a very, very powerful experience. So I think that we need to engage on a much more humane and deep level with our people, which is in some ways seems a contradiction because we're doing this digitally, but I think we have to overcome the barrier that's created with digital to try to recreate that connection. That's certainly one of the things that we're talking about, is how do we retain our culture in an environment where it's likely that more people are going to be working remotely, and how do we keep that the access that we have, and the just the casual encounters people have with each other that lead to a close-knit culture. How do you do that in the digital age? So I think that has to be something that has a very deliberate attention placed on it.
Yeah, Phil, I'll also add that, one of the interesting phenomenons we saw over the last 90 days to 120 days is that a number of clients that we support who are primarily digital first, if you want to go with the trendy term, clients actually saw vastly higher physical calls coming in of people in lockdown areas to transact business. And that was, longer call times, much higher volumes than they'd ever experienced, all voice. Even though there's digital channels, they might point to that wasn't the best digital experience. They might point to a whole host of things, but really when we looked at a lot of the call volume coming in, it was for human connection. It was for people kind of just trying to connect with people in a more human way, and they just happen to be using, staff from the places that they do business with, which was very, very interesting, and something that if you'd asked me 90 to 120 days ago, would that have happened? Absolutely not. I would never have predicted that.
And has that been quite pronounced in terms of the amount of that you've been seeing?
Yeah, actually it has. It's surprising. We have some delivery services that saw big spikes, and we saw it in also countries that tend to be very much more orientated to using applications first versus calling, and we've tended to see, depending on the demographic of people who interact with brands, that bifurcation of I only do digital or I want to talk to somebody. And what we saw was an uptick in the I only do digital much more aggressively. And it still has come through in a number of regions that are still in lockdown areas with COVIDs or just going into lockdowns. It's starting to ease up in the States where there's a lot more people out and about and having those connections. But it was fascinating to us to see that come out of what we saw across a broad spectrum of clients servicing multiple different types of services and goods.
Yeah, it's interesting and almost heartwarming actually about it. Then, so next question, something I'd love. Maybe KK would like to chime in what he thinks here. But is this really how it's going to truly be in terms of when we do eventually go back to some kind of normality? And I'm sure we'll take some of this with us, but is a lot of this work from anywhere stuff a bit of a passing phase, and we'll go back to more of a traditional work model eventually, or is this fundamentally changing how we're going to work for the next few decades?
I think it's going to change, Phil. That's my conviction. I think as Malcolm made a very interesting point, right? At every time when there has been such a big change event, correct? An event which caused a fundamental shift, you saw things changing fundamentally, correct? An example you gave for a global delivery model example 20 years back, or adoption of cloud. If you really see what's happened now is this is work from anywhere. Two things companies have realized. One is they have realized their ability to understand their current infrastructure, application, and their whole operational landscape, and they have done an adjustment. But the second thing they're starting to realize, looks like I can run in a different operating model for a lot of my services. And even if I bring people back to work, which is what's happening, even if you see one of our businesses, which is around digital workplace, which is about helping customers do this whole transition, about helping running their whole workplace services, we're seeing a very interesting return to work, but with the social distancing norms, a lot of those things, you're not going to get all those people back to work anyway. Correct? And then there's still this whole sine wave behavior happening. So I think work from anywhere will become the new norm. People will start to redesign their processes, relook at the way they want to engage. Even if you really see, we used to have such big, massive facilities for an office spaces. Maybe there's a lot of thinking going on and conversations going on to redesign those spaces, correct? And then relook at hey, I might want to get more to flexi work model. People come in for weekly stand-ups or meetups, correct? Really the shift is moving towards, can I do scaled, agile, distributed virtual now, correct? So, and I think people are going to reimagine models. We still are to figure out how to do ideation, things which need a lot of people to people connect. I think video adds a little bit of stress to people because doing work over a remote video, we've noticed based on a couple of our interactions and surveys, there is a little bit of more stress and anxiety which people have over video, correct? It looks like someone is you're being watched, correct? Rather than being in a more conversational setup. So things have to evolve, but I think work from anywhere will be the new model, especially a lot of tech services, a lot of work which we do, I think it'll be a fundamental redesign, I strongly believe.
Interesting.
And Phil, one more, 24 months is till the time you have a vaccine and all those things come back to normal. This thing is going to keep happening, correct? I think we're seeing what's happening now in China and what's the way it's spreading in India now. This is not going to be a regular norm, correct? It's going to keep going for the foreseeable future.
Yes, and it does look that way, even though there's been a few encouraging discoveries I think we'll find a treatment before we'll find a vaccine treatment for this thing. And someone was telling me that New York's going to have herd immunity pretty soon. So that might be the safest place. But anyway, I'm half joking. So Jason Kingdon, you're in the software business, and you've been so dependent on agile development, young talent, experienced talent working together, and selling complex software can be challenging. How does a company like yours adapt in this type of environment? This must be completely unprecedented for the whole culture of the industry you're in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point. I mean, the thing is, I think for us, we'd always had a kind of a distributed kind of gene, within us. If you look at kind of the Bupism platform, that's one of the things that's kind of built into that. It's built for distributed collaboration, so people work with each other and build these digital workers on the same platform, and they share those. And the intention was that that's across multiple geographies. And so the mindset's been around within us for a very long time, and to an extent, I would almost be critical of it, that we were too distributed as an organization. And so when the lockdown came, we made the transition very smoothly, I think, and actually, great aplomb. One of the things that we did, I think Alison was talking the same thing, that we looked at how do we reinvigorate the culture? How do we make certain that that you distribute that contact with the teams? That managers have their kind of daily stand-ups. Everybody just in touch with people, and that the network across the organisation is actually working. So we reinvigorated that. But I think as KK was just saying,
I think we may have lost Jason there for a second. I will, he was just getting onto this topic around skills, which I think is really interesting. And I also have a question from someone online who's asked about this increasing work from anywhere, and is it going to really change the skills model and the types of employers types of staff we're looking for and that sort of thing. I mean, Malcolm Frank, you're in another very large company, which is, having your increasing skills in certain areas, decreasing in others constantly. So, I mean, what do you think is going to be the real change to the employment model as we get deeper into this?
Yeah, just on the virtual thing for 2 seconds, I think maybe I'm the contrarian here, but I think we're going to come back to a new level, meaning that, we've got 4 million years of human evolution where we desire the company of others. This is from the savannah. It's, around the campfire, and that's not going to be rewired in 4 months. And so we've seen that with the retail bounce back in some economies. You may have seen with New Zealand rugby over the weekend that the stadiums were just stuffed. So I think we're going to find that people will want to come back and work with their colleagues, but there's still going to be a level of virtualization that I think CFOs are looking at this saying, boy, T&E is a lot lower, real estate costs are a lot lower, and how can we lock this in? To answer your question then in that context on the capabilities and what skills are going to be needed, it gets back to how do you get that Fortune 500 firm to be software driven at the core? And so with that, data modernization is going to be something which is universally needed. And so, how do you move that to the cloud, clean it up? AI and ML skills in a vertical context are going to be very important. Another is going to be around software engineering, software product engineering. How do you do enterprise DevOps to create consumer grade software at scale? Because a lot of CIOs are waking up right now and recognizing, my goodness, my organizational model is wrong. I don't have the right skills. They're not organized the right way. How do I attract this talent? And so we think that software product engineering is going to be very important. Another is how do you update the whole application estate to enable that software-driven enterprise? And so application modernization, and that's not just moving things to the cloud, but it's also completely re-architecting and refactoring these apps. And then I think something that is COVID-driven, and we're seeing huge demand for right now, is around safe buildings. So if I run a large factory, or how do I bring my workers back and commit to them this is going to be a safe environment? Or in travel, hospitality, air travel, how can I commit to my customers, even in retail, that this is going to be a safe building for them to come to, and how can I live up to that commitment? So this is driving a whole new set of capabilities and skills around data, software product engineering, and IoT.
Okay, interesting. And Mary Myers, you're now leading transformation for a company that is obviously going through a lot of technology change. Is your profile changing rapidly on the people you need to run transformation successfully?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, Phil, right? I mean, I love this conversation around the new normal, about what work looks like. I think what it does do, though, is it allows you to hire skills that maybe you haven't thought about in the past. And certainly, this pandemic situation is forcing us to kind of have to reskill people in a way they, perhaps haven't had to in the past. So yes, we're having to look at different skills, but I think part of it's also just reskilling and people being adaptable to kind of, the new way of living that we're going to have to kind of all somehow get comfortable with. But I love your little slide here, being on time, work ethic, effort, all of this, all of what you've got here to me is, that's zero talent. Those things haven't changed. I'd say what I don't see on your list here, though, is just the ability to be agile and shift quickly. Because, we've all had to get used to doing things in such a fundamentally different way. And that requires both a level of intellectual curiosity and a level of willingness, right? Which kind of, I think begs right to number 6 there, which is attitude, which is if you like going to the office, for example, and you're very rigid, you're probably not going to do well with this environment. So you need folks who've got that willingness to adapt. I mean, they could be the smartest people on the planet, but if they don't have, some of these simple kind of EQ traits such as adaptability, curiosity, then I don't think they're going to do well in any circumstances. So I think a couple of things. One, coming out of this, pandemic / economic crisis, we will work differently. What that looks like, I think we can all guess, but there's just no doubt about it. Some of this is going to stick. And I think secondly, it opens up opportunities to have people in different parts of the world, do jobs that they couldn't do before because we were so geographically, mentally bound. And I think finally, people who can really adapt and change. I think Darwin said this, right? The ability to adapt and change is kind of like the ultimate survival skill. And I think, frankly, this pandemic and this crisis has kind of highlighted that more than ever. Some things never change, Phil.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating, and it's highlighted. We're seeing quite aggressively that you start to look at the skills you need, and you start to figure out how do we get those? And do we need them as full-time staff, or can we just source them?
Exactly. Can we get them where we need them? Yeah. And how can the gig economy, and the other thing is, how does diversity become, it's no coincidence in my mind that the whole conversation around social injustice and kind of racial discrimination has come at a time like this. I think this, when the world and society is confronted with such a dramatic kind of reset, we're forced to look at ourselves as a human race and figure out what have we been doing. And so I think it's a very profound time for all of us to really absorb what this means and how we're going to move forward as a society here. And hopefully at the end, we will do so with more dignity.
Absolutely. And the first thing you think about is hiring, is having indiscriminatory hiring processes.
Exactly.
That you have to go out your way to make sure, is this vehicle I'm using covering what I need for getting a fair array of people to apply for the job? So this is really changing how we're thinking about things.
Yep.
I know we're getting a little tight on time, as we normally do, and I did want to touch upon the future of services and how can the services firms of the future be effective. We've talked a bit about this is going to be a tough market. I think the winners are those who can embrace change and make the right bets to survive. There's going to be a lot of roadkill in this one, especially when you see 10% taken out of a market where not everybody has huge cash endowments and profitability. So maybe I'll kick into Malcolm. To what do you think is going to make the current crop survive, and what do you think the winning formula is going to be next year?
Yeah, well, Phil, product companies at least have the dignity to just die a good death. And you've seen this, we can name all of them, but services firms, because of the nature of the business, can just languish and hang around forever. So, I think the question is not survival, it's who's going to thrive moving forward and what's the winning formula. I think you got to do two things in parallel. One is the unit cost of delivery has to continue to go down. Clients are demanding that, and so Moore's Law has come to services, and so you need to provide that different unit cost of delivery. And at the same time, just the issues that we've just been talking about for the last 15 minutes, couldn't agree more. How can you drive that level of transformation and innovation across an entire enterprise? And it's not just trapped inside this weird corner of the business called IT. We're going to look back and realize that even though it's a big industry, we were only dealing with a portion of SG&A that was maybe 3% of revenue. But now that it is the business, how do you drive that innovation and transformation across the business, and not just in terms of core processes and products, but also driving this social transformation across the enterprise as well? So I think the firms that can do both of those at the same time and embrace it are going to be fairly healthy over the next 5 to 10 years.
Interesting. So Chris Caldwell, you're in a slightly different segment of services to Cognizant. Do you agree that everyone survives the services, or do you think we're going to see some big failures in this one and a different order of things emerge?
So Phil, I think it's just going to speed up sort of the natural evolution of the services business, which is going to be a lot of roadkill in the middle of the road, and you're going to have very good operating niche boutique businesses, and then you're going to have large scale players where the barriers of entry have increased, and everything in the middle is going to kind of disappear, and it's either going to disappear through not being able to attract and service clients with the barriers of entry that are coming in. Or it's going to disappear because it's going to be bought up by the other folks who have sort of bigger cash availability to them. But honestly, Phil, like as much as everything going on, the reality is nothing changes in service business. You make your clients successful, they'll make you successful. You don't, they'll fire you. That hasn't changed with COVID, and I don't think it's going to change 100 years from now. So honestly, I think it's just going to speed up some of the natural consolidation that was happening in the services business, both from an IT perspective and a CRM's perspective.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Is that KK? I was about to pick on you.
No, No, I said again, see, actually, you should look at it at three levels, correct? The first thing is, as a company, how are you diversified, correct? That's very important. The first thing is, and that varies for different firms, correct? There are services only firms, there are products only firms, there are products and services mix. So, and we are seeing that with our evolution too, correct? In terms of three segments of our business, from our perspective, the IT and business services, engineering, and R&D, and our software products business, very different patterns, correct? And we're seeing very different evolution. Segmentation is spread is key. The second is, again, it's services, and I think, as Malcolm pointed out, correct? It's services about customers a lot of time, not just buys capability, and at this time they really look at, they're buying a relationship which is beyond the contract. It's a culture, correct? There's a lot of other things which come in, correct? So I think a lot of customers look through how services firms have responded to the customers during the bad times, because when the things start coming back to normal, you get a better seat in the table to have more effective conversations. So yes, you will see a different segmental mix. You will see different patterns in each segments of the business. You will see products which people thought will not be so attractive suddenly becomes more attractive, and vice versa. You'll start to see that pattern continue to emerge. But I think finally, it's people do business with people, correct? So it's a human relationship which finally matters a lot in terms of how you as individual, groups, and a company respond in the situation across all different stakeholders.
Right. But it's interesting. You've got the traditional model that emanated from India, and we even had the CEO of TCS on his earnings call publicly state that that model is going to die, and we have to move to this anywhere model, that sort of thing. I personally think it's going to be a blend, but how rapid is that model going to change? Because I felt that model actually worked pretty well, and this has obviously disrupted it. Do you think it's going to be radically shifted, or do you think it's going to be more blended as we emerge from this?
I think let me go first. I think there are two parts to this, correct, Phil? I think most of the companies who might have started India heritage or US heritage or European heritage, all of them have pretty much become global, correct? Especially the large players. So workforce is distributed because you end up going where the talent is, correct? Or you end up creating, in many cases, many of collectively us companies have created talent, correct? We had to literally run mini universities or equivalent of that to hire people and then train them and reskill them and then deploy them. And then that's how a lot of the services business have scaled, correct, across different parts. I think the distributed model will continue to happen. It's the trick of how you manage your workforce and how you manage the whole scale. If it was more pyramid shaped, yes, you would need to relook at how much of managerial overhead was needed to get work done, versus moving towards a new diamond structure, correct, where you start to really look at more self-driven, more systems and processes and tooling driven. So if you go back 20 years back, when you did remote, and I take a very simple example, correct, you could have given a lot of FTEs to solve a problem, or you could have used a platform-based managed service to drive an outcome, correct? So what I really see is that 20 years back, when we saw the same thing in the infrastructure outsourcing business, you had a lot of people centricity, where we shifted to an MSP kind of a model, which is platform centricity, and that's how RIM as an industry evolved, correct? In a true sense. So you converted from input to output and now shifting to outcome. So I think more and more as the customers, the buying pattern starts to change and move towards outcome based, then the location and that context will start to evolve towards where the skill is, where the talent is, and how you deliver. So it's going to, you'll see this market trigger happening in the next few quarters.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. So I know we're over time, so I'd like to have a round the virtual table. One learning from today's conversation that we can walk away with that we'll talk to our colleagues about when we get back together with them. Maybe we'll start with you, Alison. What's the one learning you'll take away from today, or the main learning? You there, Alison? I may have lost it.
Just unmuting, sorry. I think the piece around digital, I'm not sure who it was who talked about kind of the difference between superficial digital and true digital. I think that's a really important distinction, and I think we can think that we're digital, but truly being digital end to end seamlessly is on a different order of magnitude. I thought that was a very interesting comment.
Excellent. Yeah, someone needs to develop a cognitive mute capability for these packages. That would help everybody, I think. Thank you, Alison. Marie Myers, HP, one learning you think you'd like to take away from this? May have had another mute situation. All right, so we'll get back to Marie if she's still there. Chris Caldwell, one big learning you're taking away from this one?
Yeah, I think, Phil, versus a learning, I think it's more walking away with sort of the same consensus a lot of the other panels around, the speed of what the market is changing, which I think everyone seems to think is good, which I would agree with. And that, clearly from a work environment perspective, I think relatively similar thoughts around sort of a mixed hybrid solution as we go forward. So it kind of confirms some of the thinking that we see and have heard from our clients in the market.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. And Malcolm, Frank, one learning that you'll take away from this one?
Yeah, I was really taken by Alison's introductory comments about Shakespeare. So personally, I feel rather guilty now about binge watching The Tiger King, but more to the point, professionally, firms that are playing offense during this time and investing, moving forward, seizing advantage, I think are going to be very well rewarded, as opposed to those that are just still sitting back and trying to triage and make sense of things. So this is a window of time. Take that Shakespeare attitude, make the most of this period, and move forward.
Yeah, likewise. Yes, I think binge watching needs to be cut back. I've just started watching The Wire again after many years, so that could take an awful long time. Okay, I'd love to hear from you, Jason. I can see you're back on. One learning maybe from today's conversation?
Phil, can you hear me? Is that coming through okay? I've switched systems. So I think for me, it's this real desire for transformation and change that I'm hearing from everybody, and how available that is. That there is technology now that really is kind of constrained by imagination only, and I think people are still bumping into it, still figuring out how to access it. But a lot of the things that we've talked about, are now available, and it really comes down to imagination and the desire to make these changes. That's the thing that really struck me.
Fantastic. And last but not least, KK, one learning that you're going to bring back to your next video con with your colleagues?
I would really go with the point around every session gives a trigger point or something new comes up. So there's always an opportunity. There's always a silver lining, correct? In every catastrophic or a world impacting event. I always equate it back to Phil, my test match analogy, correct? Losing a toss in Headingley on overcast morning, correct? You still have to bat through hoping that there'll be sunshine ahead, and you basically plan your strategy and go bat. So yeah, that's the learning.
Fantastic. So Jeffrey Boycott strategy then, right?
Yep.
So thank you very much. On that note, so Malcolm, Frank, Jason Kingdon, KK, Alison, Mary Myers, Chris Caldwell, that was a really wonderful conversation. felt like it could have gone on and on. I mean, covering every topic under the sun, where we share our experiences of what's happening in the world. This is certainly an exciting time, and slightly scary time, but I think if you can see that chink of light and you can follow it and find your path to it, you start to get more focused. And I think that's our learning from everything happening. Just follow the light and know where you're going. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciated it. I'm sure I'm going to involve you all more in more of these fun conversations, and I really appreciate you giving up some of your Thursday to share these views and ideas with us. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.